Northeast Scotland, almost at the end of the world, I met this wonderful woman, Eileen Caddy. When I first saw her, she was to me the embodiment of love. And at the same time, my mother, my grandmother, my universal mother. When I first came to Findhorn, the community had already been in existence for 33 years. Why did I come? During the Findhorn Experience Week, which I took part in 1995, I was touched by the universal love, and from that moment on I knew that I wanted to spend some time in this powerful energy. When Eileen came to the Bay of Findhorn for the very first time, it was the year 1962.
She embodied a way of being which was feet on the ground, but heart completely open.
She was really shining and glowing, and it gave me courage to carry on, really, to be dedicated to my spiritual path.
Her strong persistence and dedication has showed me so much, and continues to show me a lot.
I feel the connection is very strong, and her messages are, coming alive in daily meditations or attunements that we do, because we often go back to her words.
Eileen Caddy had finished her life's work. In 2004, she was awarded a member of the British Empire in recognition of her spiritual endeavours and services to mankind. This was 2 years before she died. It was Eileen's kind personality that made me want to stay and meditate close to her.
So what about some questions? I find a lot of people come here to Findhorn and they see the way it's grown now. But it started with the one little caravan down there, and there were 3 adults and the 3 boys, and there we lived for 7 years. I thought we would only be there for 6 months, but it was for 7 years. And I feel that we learned so many lessons living at such close quarters. One has to learn tolerance and understanding, passion, all these lessons. And patience.
Guided by Eileen's inner voice in 1962, the small group was led to the Bay of Findhorn. Eileen wrote down her revelations on a daily basis. Her husband, Peter Caddy, with his positive energy, then made all of their plans become real. The third on the team, Dorothy MacLean. She had the talent to connect with nature, thus eventually allowing oversized plants to thrive. With each digging of a spade, rays of love were sent deep into the inner earth. One of the most astonishing experiments on this globe commenced.
So lange sind wir hier, wenn du hier schaust, wie hoch die Bäume sind alle von uns gewachsen. Das war alles offen, Sandboden, Ginster.
Kay the Wanderer is one of the long-term members of the community. It was him who first told me about Findhorn. For many years he has been working in the garden, has lived through many changes in the community.
Ich denke, wenn wir lernen, mit unserer eigenen Natur freundlicher umzugehen, wenn wir lernen, dass wir untrennbar sind von der Natur und mit der Natur arbeiten, dann ist das möglich. Dann ist Findhorn möglich mit all dem, was jetzt hier wächst und gedeiht. Und dann ist es möglich, dass sich die Wüsten in dem Herzen der Menschen in fruchtbare Gärten verwandeln.
Eileen's small group gathered round each evening in order to meditate together for 2 to 3 hours. Considering all aspects of life, their main goal was to lift vibrations. They started to send out rays of love into the whole world.
I feel two most important lessons to learn when you put your foot on the spiritual path. One is self-discipline and the other is obedience. Now with self-discipline, when I first started, and this was about 45 years ago, I had specific times to meditate. 6 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock noon, and 9 o'clock at night. My appointments with God. And you're not late when you have an appointment with God. You're on time. And then I would write everything down. And obedience was to follow it through. What's the use of getting guidance unless you follow it through? I mean, you don't just say, no, I'll leave that until another time, I'll just do it later. Do it. Take action.
Today's garden. Community members and their guests are fully involved. Love is work in action means as much as love what you're doing, for it's never enough just to think positively, but to act in a positive way as well. Omar, a young Mexican, came to Findhorn in order to enroll in a 1-month English course. He stayed and has been here for 2 years.
I never did gardening in my life, so for me to put my hands on the soil for the first time and just care for a little plant and care for the, and hear the birds all the time, it was such a magical thing for me. It was like I discovered a passion that I didn't know I had.
The compost is the base for the garden's fertile soil.
Hier ist der Platz, wo alles, was sonst Müll ist, was keinen Platz hat im Leben, was überflüssig ist, was unnütz ist, wo das so mit anderen Teilen integriert wird, dass es brauchbar wird und dass es den Boden gibt für die Äpfel, die wachsen, die Blumen, die wachsen.
Again and again, Eileen heard the words, "Everything you do, do it out of love, and it will bear fruit. Deep down in the ground, there is also radiation from your work." Dorothy MacLean returned to the community in 2009. Her work with nature has inspired many people. Antje is one of them.
Ich habe eine Heilpraktika-Ausbildung gemacht, wo ich sehr viel über Heilpflanzen gelernt habe. Aber dieses spirituelle sich mit den Pflanzen verbinden, das gab es nicht zu lernen. Deswegen dachte ich, in Findhorn ist der Ort, wo man das herausfinden kann. Und im Laufe der Zeit, die ich jetzt schon hier bin, fast 15 Jahre, habe ich auch sehr viele Sachen gefunden, wo man lernen kann, wie man besser mit der Natur zusammenarbeitet. Und es ist ein sehr effektives, einfaches System.
Pan, the all-embracing God, stands for nature. At the same time, he is also the mediator between man and nature. Antje and her partner have developed the game, which brings us closer to his kingdom.
And I would write everything down.
Et alors j'écrivais tout.
We are going to expand and expand beyond recognition. What a ridiculous thing to write down. We were living on £8 a week. How can we expand and expand on £8 a week? Or I wrote it down. And then I also wrote down, and thousands upon thousands of people would come here. It was ridiculous. But you see, that is exactly what has happened. We have expanded and expanded beyond recognition. And I mean, thousands upon thousands of people have come and are coming. And I knew that we were being guided step by step. That's the thing, it's faith really. It's faith.
Eileen's son, Jonathan Caddy, returned to the community after his studies. He was born in the original caravan. Jonathan recalls,
many things went on. in that caravan. Also, when there was another caravan on the sanctuary where Naomi, a friend, came to stay there, and that's where my parents and Dorothy used to meditate. And we would go in now and again, and there was a big map on the wall and a globe there, and there would be bits of plasticine and little pins on the world. There were these we learnt were special places throughout the earth, that places of magnetic power points, spiritual places on the earth, and we were led to believe, so we heard in the talk that went on, that Findhorn was one of these places.
Each and every one who came to Findhorn had to offer a certain talent to the community. The old and the young, they all felt magnetically attracted by an invisible spiritual power. Eileen's inner voice guided them with directions that were read to the group by Peter every morning. All together they followed up these directions. By the end of the 70s, the community had already over 300 members. Eileen's guidance has been published in many books. One of the most well-known, Opening Doors Within, has been translated into more than 30 languages. Her autobiography describes her extraordinary story. As the second of 4 children, Eileen Caddy was born in Alexandria, Egypt in 1917. Ever since she was a small child, she was touched by the love her parents felt for each other. Because her father was the director of Barclays Bank, the family resided in a spacey house surrounded by palm trees. When she was 6 years old, Eileen's parents decided to send her and her brother Paddy off to their aunt in Ireland. Schools in Egypt were considered not suitable for British children. When Eileen turned 16, her beloved father suddenly died. Eileen returned to Egypt to look after her mother. When later her brother Rex got ill, the entire family went back to England. 1 year later, her mother passed away. Within 2 years' time, she had lost both of her parents. Before the war broke out, Eileen met Andrew Combe, an Air Force officer. They eventually got married and had 5 children together. From London, her husband was transferred to America and then to Iraq. Eileen felt quite comfortable in her role as a mother and housewife. One day, Andrew brought home with him a young, dynamic gentleman. Ever since then, Peter Caddy visited the family whenever he could. What impressed Eileen the most about Peter was his optimism and his positive way of thinking. Once, when paying another visit to the family, he told Eileen about an unusual occurrence. It had become clear to him that Eileen was his other half. Eileen fell deeply in love with Peter. She was ready for everything life had in store for her. She left Andrew in order to be with Peter, not realizing that from then on, she would not be allowed any contact with her 5 children for the next 17 years. One day, when Peter and Eileen visited a place in Glastonbury, Eileen sat in deep meditation. She started begging for help, for the separation from her children was very hard on her. And then, for the first time in her life, she heard her inner voice. "Be still and know that I am God. I wanted you and Peter to meet each other for a special reason." Eileen was stunned.
I had very clear inner directions that I was to have only 2 hours sleep at night. And the rest of the time I waited upon God. This was from within. If somebody outside had said to me, Eileen, that's what you have to do, I'd say, no way. And for 8-9 years, I did this. Then it was, with my food, I was to have nothing but raw vegetable salads, etc. Until the salads came out of my ears and out of my nose.
Jusqu'à ce que la salade ne sorte par les oreilles, par le nez.
And I did that as well. But I was cooking for the family in that little kitchen. But that was my discipline. It was my cleansing. I was only allowed to drink water.
Et je ne pouvais boire que de l'eau.
That was the no coffee, no tea, no anything like that.
Voilà, pas de thé, pas de café.
And no alcohol.
Et surtout pas d'alcool.
In 1957, Peter applied for a job as manager of the Cluny Hill Hotel in Scotland and was hired. At that time, Eileen and Peter were being married and had 3 children. The hotel was to be run according to spiritual principles. By that time, Dorothy MacLean was also working with them. With each problem, Eileen turned to her inner voice, which she called the God within. In this way, the Cluny Hill Hotel was managed entirely according to the directions of a higher energy. However, after 5 years, the management had other plans for them. They had to move to prop up another company's hotel. In 1975, when the community celebrated their 13th anniversary, the Findhorn Foundation had become so well known that it was getting difficult to accommodate the many visitors. By that time, the Cluny Hill Hotel had been put up for sale. The community decided to buy it without Eileen and Peter being present. So the Cluny Hill Hotel was renamed Cluny Hill College and was turned into a guest centre with work and classrooms as a part of the Findhorn Foundation.
I feel this is God's community, and I can see God in all that is happening. And we make mistakes, but we learn from them. And for me, I feel very happy with what's happening. And whenever I start to feel distressed, I come back center and to all is very, very well. For me, life is change all the time. I think if we stopped changing, I would be very worried. We would become complacent, we would become stagnant, and we'd die. And I feel that because of all the changes that are taking place, we're moving. And I thank God for that. The changes are not comfortable, but they're very necessary.
The community continued to change and grow. Peter and Eileen worked together very closely. It was often said that the two embodied a perfect balance between light and love. The barrel houses were built from 1988 onwards. In the 70s, they were still barrels of a whiskey distillery. Today, they are beautiful homes made of natural construction material. In one of the houses lives Craig Gibson, an Australian citizen. What brought him to Findhorn? He too, like many others, was attracted by the invisible magnetic energy. He is one of the ones who experienced the spiritual beginnings in the 60s.
When I first came, Eileen's guidance was read out every day in the sanctuary and was part of community life. And for myself and everybody else, that was just fine. There was a very clear sort of spiritual directive. And then, as and when the time came, particularly the time around when David Spegler came in the early 70s, there was a lot more around sort of, you could say, self-actualization of your own spiritual guidance or intuition. And Eileen had very clear guidance that she should no longer get it for the collective. She still continued to receive it for the rest of her life, but she stopped sort of giving the day-to-day messages in the sanctuary. And it was particularly hard for Peter, because Peter was actually completely reliant on her directive.
Eileen wanted to encourage Peter to rely on his own voice. That was one of the most difficult directions which she received and which she followed. She no longer was to serve as a channel. Each and everyone in the community needed to learn to look inside, to become aware of their feelings, to develop their intuition, and to act from their insight. At that time, the community started building the Universal Hall. Since Eileen had ceased to convey any further directions, it took 10 years for its completion. Hundreds of different people helped to build Universal Hall. They all shared their talents, their knowledge, their visions, their individual ideas, and their love for one another. The Universal Hall grew out of one space, from the energy of all of those involved. The Universal Hall is the heart of the active community life. This is where all events like theatre plays, concerts, as well as community activities take place.
It's up to each individual to find or to go through changes and to look for the very best and the very highest. We can despair if we look at just the negative. I want to be part of the answer to the chaos and confusion. And I feel the only way one can do that is by being very positive, constructive, and loving. And it all starts in each individual. There's no use looking at somebody else and say, why doesn't she change? Change has to come within each one of us. Well, the best thing for you to do is to send love to those people.
La meilleure chose que tu peux faire alors, c'est d'envoyer de l'amour à ces personnes.
I feel that's all one can do.
C'est la seule chose que tu peux faire.
But you don't try to change people.
Mais il faut pas essayer de changer les gens malgré eux.
All you have to do is to change yourself.
Tout ce que tu peux faire, c'est te changer toi-même.
What can I do to help this situation? Well, there's no use being worried about the future.
Mais ça sert à rien d'être angoissé.
All is very, very well. This is a more consciousness. I could be very, very worried about the community, but I'm not. I have to put it into God's hands and say, please, help us and direct us the right way.
The members of the community made an effort to follow their inner guidance, which sometimes led to confusion rather than to clarification. Peter had to learn to let go by surrendering the responsibility to the others. Eileen and Peter started having differences. As Eileen no longer passed any guidance to Peter, he started looking more and more for confirmation from the other members of the community. When eventually separation became inevitable, it was a very painful blow to Eileen. Peter finally left the community. Eileen continued sitting in meditation each day and made herself available to all those who came to meet her.
She's a good example in this community of someone relinquishing their, you could say, authority or their leadership, and allowing it to pass out into the community. So she amplifies that, and I think that's one of the strengths of Findhorn, is that Findhorn has always, leadership has always been let go of and assumed by the next person, and then is supported by the people of the past.
In each work department of the community, along with the visitors, the members tune into the work they are about to carry out. In this way, it will be decided how the different tasks will be shared between the group.
We have them. What? We have them for lunch. Oh, possibly. Maybe, probably more likely dinner.
Becky has been working in the garden for 7 months. She decided to participate in the students' program, which lasts for 1 year.
That's what I really appreciate about Findhorn, is that it's not about listening to dogmas or anything from the outside. It's not about believing in something else. It's about inner listening and really getting in touch with yourself and your truth. And that I find most fulfilling and really resonating with me. That it's not about believing a story external to me. It's about finding truth in myself and how I can access it.
Whenever I've been given a vision, been given a promise, I have held it in my consciousness. I've held it in my heart. Never let it go until it manifests in vision. It was very wonderful. Only a few days ago, about a couple of weeks ago, they were starting on the kitchen, and they weren't going to have any skylights. Katerina came to me and said, "I cannot work in the dark." I said, "Well, you'll have to pray about it then, won't you?" A few days later, I got an anonymous letter with 2 checks, both of them for £700 from Germany. I have no idea who sent them. And the letter said, please use this donation for the kitchen, if the kitchen still needs any money, or else use it for bursaries. So I went to Katerina, I said, look, it's manifested a little bit. So we have the skylights. And I just said, thank you, God. So wonderful. And it only took a few days. And to me, that is the way we should be living. With faith. It's just, it does work. To begin with, when we had nothing at all, it seemed utterly impossible. We never had a vision that we would be building a community. If I'd known we were going to create a community this size, I would have run away from it. I think I was only given a little bit at a time, and it just grew organically.
Et tout a évolué très organiquement, heureusement.
So this is the way Findhorn was created, through
C'est comme ça que
The Spring Festival. Celebrating the seasonal festivals is an important part of the Findhorn community. To be together with other people, to experience things together, to communicate, to sing, to dance, to laugh. These are the elements that shape the everyday life in the community.
Wizard Merlin lent me his whole locator. Just for today. Is this the right place? Signs are good.
The best way to get to know the community is to participate in the Experience Week, which is the main program of the Findhorn Foundation. However, the main source of income for the community is based on the vast number of creative workshops and conferences offered each year. Dilton is in charge of the new Findhorn Association. She explains how the community has unfolded.
We have developed into a community with different roles and functions. and with a wide range of skills and abilities and interests as well. Before, let's say, 92, there were, so there were like the red dots are the individuals who came, and there were hardly any people. There were a few, but not so many who lived outside the actual Findhorn Foundation premises and accommodation. They all lived within the Findhorn Foundation and within its kind of structure. It started to evolve within this one cell. And then the 90s were very much, so then the expansion started to happen. So Trees for Life and the game and the publishing company, the shop and health, so and many more moved out of the Findhorn Foundation to become and to create their own organization and business and charity. At the same time, this center attracted people who wanted to be here but who did not want to be part of the Findhorn Foundation. And that was actually quite a difficult period, especially the mid-90s. It was actually very difficult because people came here and lived in Findhorn and in Forest and around and wanted to be part of the center, but did not want to be part of the Findhorn Foundation. And that created quite a pressure on the Findhorn Foundation because that was the only organization which provided anything. Out of this pressure cooker came this need to create a structure which embraced all of this and relieved the foundation also from its, being the center of it all. So, so in 1999, we created an umbrella organization which we called New Findhorn Association, and all the different organizations which have kind of emerged from the foundation and many more by now have joined the community organization as well as individuals. So we are all held together. So yeah, so we are constantly learning, but we have achieved a lot already since 99. So we are 13 years into the process of building and forming the structure for the village.
Approximately 13 years ago, the community started building ecological houses on a larger scale. Today, an independent eco-village exists that provides more than 100% of its energy needs from renewable sources. This is a model which has inspired new approaches to sustainable living, which is now being applied in many settlements around the world.
I sometimes feel we forget that we are a spiritual community. I was going to say the sort of we've become very materialistic. I had to wait 28 years before this house was built for me. I was in that little caravan next door. I was sitting there one afternoon. I was told you're to have a house built. So I thought, how silly, because I haven't got the money. But I got the word, you're to have a house built, and it's to be the cornerstone for something entirely new in the community. I didn't know what it meant.
Moi, je ne savais pas ce que ça voulait dire.
I was told it was to be here. And my youngest son is a builder, and I said, I'm to have a house built. It's ridiculous, but I'm to have a house built. And he said, if you're going to have a house built, Mum, I'm going to come and build it. And I just feel so grateful. I love my home. This was the first house that was built. This was the first house that was finished. I decided to call it Cornerstone because that's what I was told. It was to be the cornerstone for something entirely new in the whole community. And I think it's our mode of living has changed really since.
As the community has evolved, new structures have grown with it. People that live here are financially independent from the Findhorn Foundation. For all of them, however, their priorities are their spirituality and their desire to live in harmony with nature.
Hier ist ein Haus, wo wir experimentiert haben mit dem Bauen von Häusern mit Strohballen. Das heißt, das ganze Haus ist ein Holzrahmen und die Wände sind alle aus Strohballen. Das Schöne an den Häusern aus Strohballen ist, dass sie aus einem Material sind, das natürlich ist, das den meisten Menschen auf der Erde relativ leicht zur Verfügung steht. Die Strohballen werden aufeinander geschichtet und ineinander verankert und dann werden sie von außen mit einer Schicht aus Lehm und ein bisschen Kalk versiegelt. Das heißt, es ist luftdicht abgeschlossen und dadurch sind es dicke Wände, die sehr gut isolieren. Es ist keine Feuergefahr und es lässt sich sehr gut drin leben. Und es ist relativ preiswert.
Young people are encouraged to get involved with the ecological system of our planet. The college offers academic programs for university students. The aim of most of these programs is to deepen into the inner life, working with feelings and needs, in order to develop creative ways of working together as a group.
It is like a laboratory for students who are studying. They could come from the fields of architecture or social studies or sustainability studies, ecology, to come here and experience the various aspects of sustainable living in a community. And very often they find not only the technical side of a community, of how the community is set up with its buildings and technologies, but very often they learn a lot about the social relationships that are needed for a community to function well.
Another project is called The Living Machine, which is a fully biological sewage system.
The first tank in the living machine is the closed aerobic, where we pump air into the water, and of course that's got the essential oxygen in it that kills the anaerobic bacteria. So after the closed aerobic, we come to 4 open aerobic tanks, which are filled with the water, and they go deep down into the ground. We've got floating plant racks sitting on top of the water. The roots of the plants hang down into the water and provide an essential house and environment for aerobic bacteria to now live. They cling to the roots and they digest the organic matter in the water. This is a ginger. Because we've got such tropical conditions in the greenhouse, we've got a ginger plant here. Now we have the clarifier. You can see here we've covered the top of the water by duckweed. This plant acts as a blanket, so it stops algae growing on top of the tank and potentially blocking up any pipes. So the bacteria dies as it doesn't have the oxygen, and the sludge falls to the bottom and gets sucked out by a sludge pump and gets sent back to the mound again. So we're actually redigesting the sludge, which is brilliant design. We also have water fleas in the tank here, which are also digesting the dead bacteria. We'll take this with us and we can feed them to the fish at the end of the system. And these are the ecological fluidized beds, the EFBs. The central ring is filled with clinker stone. It's got lots of holes in it. It's highly porous. And that's perfect for now further bacteria are living inside those stones. The more surface area there is, the more bacteria we can support. We'll take these to the pond then. Watercress, water mint. We're at the end of the system now, so we've just got a little example of the quality of the water where you can actually see into it, and you can see that the water's become clean enough to support a wider variety of animals. So it just shows how the water quality has improved dramatically over the 3 to 5 days that it's taken to pass through the system. So I think the frog's going to jump. We'll see. And the fish often know that the water's coming in, so you might find that they go there.
The next challenge for the Findhorn community is the construction of new houses. The coordinator of this project is Dorothy Caddy.
The power of this place is that we actually don't just think spiritual principles, but actually put them into action. This cluster is designed to be an example of intergenerational living, so that we have young people and older people within this, so that people can help each other. That's why the shared facilities are important, that there's opportunities to do things together, to help each other. There's also a number of affordable houses that we have fundraised for. 2 of those are community care flats, so that if there are older people that need to move out of their houses, instead of going to an old people's home, they can actually live within the community.
Jonathan Caddy is the only one of Eileen's children who lives here and actively engages in the ongoing evolution of the Findhorn community. For a long time, Eileen had been prevented from having any contact with her 5 children from her first marriage. Only when she celebrated her 80th birthday was she able to come together with all 8 of her children. Today, the core of the community consists of approximately 130 members of the Findhorn Foundation. In the surrounding area, there are over 400 people who are members of the new Findhorn Association and who are actively involved with the community. Having been a regular visitor since 1994, Sarah has known the community for a long time. She has been living in her present house in the Findhorn village for 4 years.
The open community is a very vibrant resource here, and one, I think, often people out in the world feel quite isolated, perhaps, or out of touch with others. But what I experience here at Findhorn is truly a functional community that connects people, that supports people, that inspires people in so many different ways.
I'm really thankful to live with other people that want to meditate, that want to attempt to live in harmony, that want to listen to one another, to try to communicate with one another on a heart level. You know, we're all going through ups and downs, and we're all humans making mistakes, but there's just such a genuine, warm feeling of everyone trying to do better.
A large event takes place. 50 years passed since Eileen came to Findhorn for the very first time. Former members returned to celebrate the 50th birthday together with the community.
And we thought it would be a good time to bless the cake.
My message is to be still, to go within, to find that center, the source, and then to live and move and have our being from that divine center. I mean, that is my message. Simple as that. But people find it so difficult to be still. They don't know how to do it. How do you do it? Well, all right. I feel each individual needs to find their own technique, and the one that they're really comfortable with. Whether it's to do with your breath, breathing, and breathe for 4, count 4, and then hold it for 4, then breathe out until you get into a rhythm.
This world's a crazy place, a sick and twisted rat race of games that we play against ourselves. But the Red Robin, she knew best, when in my cradle she made a nest, and she told me not to be afraid, and she gave me joy as a middle name, and she told me joy was my strength.
Ella me dijo, estas son las manos y las piernas de Dios, ¿no? Esta es me quiso decir, esto, lo que yo soy, es la expresión personal de Dios. Y eso me emocionó muchísimo. Me pareció muy bonito, ¿no? Es como diciendo, lo personal de Dios es a través tuyo, de mío, de cada uno de nosotros. Nosotros somos la expresión de Dios.
Eileen would always be so clear and spontaneous, and I can remember her saying, live it, be it, embody it, become it. And she was talking about love. And when she'd say those words, she would be love. You could see that.
Altogether, I spent 2 years in Findhorn. The experiences I gained during this time have influenced my entire life. Extraordinary achievements become possible when we allow ourselves to be touched by the spirit of love. As we learn to share this love with others and radiate it out to our environment, we can create together an experience of integration, healing, and pure bliss.